The Section 230 thing is interesting. It was Section 230 or 40?
Yeah, 230.
230. So in 2020, the Democrats were threatening to pull this Section 230 thing from these social media platforms. And Section 230 basically is like a lawsuit shield for these giant companies, these social media companies that are essentially, like utilities, so that they're not liable for someone going on their platform and posting something, right?
Yeah.
And now it seems like after this Charlie Kirk assassination that the Republicans are doing this. You had Lindsey Graham just say something about Section 230. You had Pam Bondi. She just said something about hate speech and Section 230, but I think she walked it back.
Yeah.
And just the other day, I was watching this Tucker Carlson monologue that he did the other day where he was showing basically all these Democrats in Congress and talking about threatening Section 230, talking to Kash Patel. Need to start talking about Section 230. They're talking about you, Kash Patel. They're saying mean things about you. And what is going on with that? And can you explain to people, can you give them like a better context of like this whole Section 230 thing and using that as like this stick against these social media companies?
Yeah, so it boils down to this platform publisher distinction. So the idea is when the internet came online in the 1990s and you started to have, independent websites, this is before social media, this law was formed that basically allowed the modern internet. Whether it's a comment on your blog or a static web 1.0, website that somebody else writes on. What Section 230 of the allowed you to do is it said if you are a platform rather than a publisher with editorial control, if you're a neutral platform and you do not exercise editorial discretion over what content is hosted, then you have a liability from lawsuits like defamation lawsuits. Like if the New York Times writes something about you, New York Times is a publisher, you can sue the New York Times for defamation. If Twitter in its kind of classical state, if they simply were a platform that hosted but did not exercise editorial discretion over what was published, then the idea is you could do a defamation lawsuit against that user who posts on that platform, but you could not sue the platform itself because it had a liability shield from Section 230. And so when all the social media companies in 2017, 2018 started exercising editorial discretion over what could be published on their platforms through their terms of service policies, it naturally created this wave of pressure and legal scholarship around violations of Section 230 because they were no longer acting as platforms. They were clearly acting as a publisher by deciding what kind of content could or couldn't be published there. And then, there's sort of a counter argument where it's saying, well, we're not deciding individually what's published. We're setting general terms of service policies. And then, so it's not like we published you're still your own publisher on our site, but there are rules to qualify for what it can be. So that fight has played out. And if you just get rid of the Section 230 entirely, all you're going to be left with is, YouTube and Facebook, because nobody else can, like Gab, for example, or like BitChute or Odyssey, or smaller platforms will not be able to comply. Right. They'll be bankrupted very quickly. Right. So the question, I've always seen this kind of Chinese finger trap. It's like you put your fingers into the Section 230 and you can never get it out because it's just really, really hard to find the exact constellation of puzzle pieces that protects the ability to have a tech market online, but then also preempts the kind of censorship decisions that the American people don't like. But then you also do want to be able to have platforms have discretion over what kind of content they host. Like that. The issue is when you have these giant mega platforms that functionally are utilities, you can't operate in the modern world. Try being a salesperson without a Facebook account, an Instagram, a YouTube, a LinkedIn. You're kicked back to the industrial age. Yeah. You can't have a modern job. You can't. be a mom and pop florist shop unless you can promote your business. You
right.
know? So, in terms of what the Trump administration is doing right now, there are things that have made me a little uncomfortable that have gone up to a certain line. There's an open question about so I don't know that Lindsey Graham, actually, I'm not familiar with what he specifically said that you mentioned, but if you're saying he was threatening Section 230 enforcement. Well, I mean, to me, that's...
So you can find the clip of it, Steve. Lindsey Graham talking about Section 230 recently.
So there's a couple things here. One is, incitement to... These protections are mostly, in my view, around political speech. Like the First Amendment is a protection of speech, but there are... you don't have protection to incite violence, for example.
Right.
And there's standards. There's something called the Brandenburg standard. Brandenburg v. Ohio was a case from a couple of decades ago that established where the line is about incitement. There has to be an imminent threat to bodily harm. It can't be it's First Amendment protected speech to, say, I think someone should die, or, but there are lines where if you say,
go here now and do this.
Right, exactly. If it's imminent, this is fire in a movie theater type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with the Charlie Kirk stuff, I think that you've got this really kind of dangerous moment where you had what I think is the most high profile assassination in modern history, and done in a way that was way more vivid than any assassination, I think, in world history. I mean, we don't know what JFK looked like when it took years for the Zapruder film to come out.
Right.
Even that was fuzzy.
It was 10 years
gray.
or something.
Yeah. But
can you imagine if we had social media during the 60s?
Yeah. But with Charlie, you saw right away. I mean, you saw the life leave his body. You saw the close-up shots are absolutely gory and gruesome. And it was done in broad daylight at an open college event. And, there is, it's not, if you say, assassinate Mike Benz next, assassinate, Danny Jones next, there is a kind of, well, this is not really political speech. This is, incitement to violence. And the question is it actually incitement?
Right.
Now it's one thing to say, Charlie Kirk sucked. He was a horrible person. He's, or even to say something like it's a good thing he died, or that. So that's uncouth. It's completely distasteful. Yeah. I completely disagree with it. That would be like a political commentary on an event. You have seen a lot of language that is really dark in that gray zone. Like when you see someone say Matt Walsh next, and then you see that person is, got a 65,000 followers and has a history. Maybe the tweet right before that was them drawing, a bullet point, laser sight on the thing. And, I think I'm not as worried about, for the free speech environment, about some of the things that are happening with this Charlie Kirk thing, because this is not this is a healthcare dispute or immigration dispute or a DEI. This is you have to. I mean, you look at what happened with this ICE shooting, the week after Charlie Kirk, right? This guy goes in and engraves bullets that say anti-ICE and goes in, shoots up this ICE facility, and evidently kills migrants detained there. But he had engravings just like the Charlie Kirk shooter, and there were a couple other weird things that were so. But I don't think in general that the conservative base has wants to replicate what Democrats and the kind of never Trump Republicans did in the 2020 era. Mm-hmm. There isn't, the only thing that I've seen that comes close to that line so far, because if Lindsey Graham says that, I mean, there were so many times that was said by Republicans during Russiagate. You had the Republican-controlled House Intelligence Committee, threatening Section 230 against that. This is one of the reasons that it went this far with censorship, because the Democrats were calling for censorship, but the Republicans who were in control of Congress at the time were all like these neocon Republican types who were all part of this like Russiagate blob, and they wanted a crackdown on Russian disinformation too, and they were threatening Section 230 alongside Donald Trump. But I think when Pam Bondi made that statement about hate speech, she quickly ran into the ire of the base over that, and she issued, I think, what was intended to be a clarification, where she said, "Oh, I meant hate speech that crosses the line into incitement to violence." And so I think that was an attempt to say, like, because a lot of these people, their regular jobs, they're not fluid with the language and the distinctions. Her job is running the Justice Department. She, doesn't have like a bachelor's in disinformation studies and this sort of thing. And so I think she probably just grabbed the nearest available term for, speech that we will take action against. But obviously we don't want action just on, we want to copy Europe style hate speech laws. But obviously if you have incitement to violence, you don't need hate speech first. So I think that she did try to correct that to make it synchronize with free speech principles. There is this question about whether or not the FCC applied pressure around the Jimmy Kimmel thing.
Nexstar.
Yeah, but I don't actually know what the underlying facts on the ground were about what the FCC actually did in that case. I know there were allegations that there was pressure to potentially hold up like a merger. At the end of the day, it lasted a week, and even Sinclair is back on, with Kimmel. So I think that every movement is prone to passions. The question is whether they become institutionalized.